Well, Talking Church, I am here
What's
at General
up?
Council with Pastor Mike Burnette. It's amazing to have you here.
Hey, man.
Come on.
I just love you and your family and so thankful. Thanks for asking me to do this.
So you're in Clarksville,
Tennessee. Yep.
Which is how far? It's like an hour outside of Nashville, you said?
We're 45 minutes from Nashville on the Kentucky border.
Okay.
If you're older than 40, you know the song by the Monkees, The Last Train to Clarksville.
Never heard it.
It was a war protest song. Ironically, the Monkees were a satire Beatles knockoff anyway. You don't want to talk about that. But that's what most people older than me know of Clarksville.
I've never heard that. It's like people, when they meet me, depending on how old they are, they will share whatever movie makes sense. So if they're older than like 50 or 45, they'll be like, oh, Logan's Run. And I'm like, the only reason I've seen it is because it's my, like, I've not seen the movie, but I saw like 10-minute clip of it. And then if they're in the middle, they'll be like, oh, Wolverine.
That's right.
And then young kids will be like, Logan Paul. And so it's generational, is that connection. So,
I get that too with the name Mike, Mike Tyson or Mike.
I mean, the resemblance and all
that. It's the muscles.
So you've been a pastor for how many years there at LifePoint, right?
Yeah, LifePoint Church, 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You planted it?
Revitalization.
Okay.
I'm not a start-from-scratch guy.
Yeah, me neither.
I honor anyone who can do that. I think it's brilliant, amazing. I love the idea of rehabbing something, so fixing broken things. And so I took over a church that was a 5-year-old church plant. We had a guy who planted. He was a traveling evangelist, came off the road, and planted a church from nothing. And I'm so thankful that he did that. 5 years later, I became the pastor. There was a transition, and by the time I got there, church had dwindled down quite a bit. 52 voting members elected me to be pastor. 2 of them said no. Yeah. I still don't know who they are. But anyway, 50 people voted me in as pastor with $2.5 million in debt.
Ooh.
Brand new building, which was great.
Yeah.
But $2.5 million in debt. So that was awesome. My launch team was 50 upset people and no money. It was great.
But at that point, obviously, you're kind of like, all right, there's 50 people here.
It can only go up.
Yeah, it can only go up. I mean, I suppose it could go down. It's like, it could go to zero.
So the reality was we had no money. And like my first month as pastor, we were $15,000 behind to just make
bills and everything,
including my salary. So anyway,
so you started with a negative salary.
Yeah, I took the job and I signed on. Like I agreed. I said, yeah, I'll take this job. I was 30. My wife and I had 2 little kids, and I was really excited to just lead my own church. God's church that He gave me as lead pastor. So anyway, I didn't get into it for money. I'm still not in it for money. So when they said, hey, we're going to pay you, they gave me a kind of the slide the paper across the desk kind of move. Here's what we're going to pay you. I said, you guys will never pay me this because you're so far behind financially. They go, well, here's what we want to pay you.
Right.
So I said, I'm not in it for money. I just took the job. But we had some miracles along the way. And the first one was after I had accepted the job, a week later, so the church had 28 acres of an old farm they bought and built a building on it. Honestly, it was a 10,000 square feet building in the middle of a farm that was totally overgrown, like 2.5 feet tall weeds everywhere. We couldn't afford to mow the grass. But we had 28 acres, and the neighbor called asking, can we buy 4 acres of your property, and we'll pay you cash for it, full market value. So I get a call a week after I had accepted the job. I had gone back to Missouri to pack up my house and move. And they called and said, hey, our neighbors want to buy some of this property. They've offered cash, can close in 10 days. And they said this, the guy was like, as soon as you get here, we'll call a business meeting. We'll have a church-wide vote. And I said, that's a dumb idea. Yeah. Just sell it before I come because you guys can't even afford to pay my salary. So this is great. I'd love to have a paycheck. So anyway, that was the Lord's provision.
That's awesome.
They were able to, and so they were able to commit to paying me for 1 year. And then they said, if you can't earn your money back after a year, get the money back into a healthy position, then I'd have to find a job.
Right.
But really, we were like 4 months from foreclosing on the property the whole first year I was there.
Wow. Which
was an adventure. We grew every single month. We've grown for every year that we've been there, but we grew every single month. We went to 2 services in 6 months, renamed the church, and kind of relaunched our core DNA of who we were and everything. So now we're 10 months later, we're twice as big, like 220 people, 2 services, which, by the way, they were 2 thin services, but I just wanted to get people into, like, you can serve one and sit one as fast as possible. So anyway, and then more miraculous things where God used to kind of bump our finances up. But that's a stressful adventure.
Yeah.
We're going to grow a church with less than no money. And literally, I had a meeting with the president of the bank that held the note. And I had to ask him, so what does it do to my personal credit to foreclose inevitably on this property?
Right.
And he kept he'd say, well, I don't think it'll hurt you personally, but, it might. You are the president and your name's on the document. So.
Right. You're like, probably.
Stress.
Yeah. No, it's huge. I mean, it's a lot of similarities to my parents early on, 28 years ago. And I think the point, and obviously there's things like CMN and ARC and great organizations that are raising money to support church planners.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think the truth of it is that that's not the silver bullet. Right?
Money?
It's not,
No way.
It's not the silver bullet. And there's been churches that have launched with $1 million right away, and they're closed.
Yep.
And then there's been other churches that are negative, that are open and thriving. And, I don't know what year it was, but, numbers like this are not always the most helpful, but it's like, hey, fastest growing church in America and all these things. And you're starting to see, again, taking this church from 50 people and growing it to now reaching, way more than maybe you even would have imagined.
For sure.
But what I want to talk about, we were talking about this yesterday, is sometimes you get into this level of you have enough where you don't want to lose it now.
Yeah.
And so you start making decisions. Back when you were 50 people, you're like, again, sell the land. What do we, we got nothing.
Yeah, we can't even mow it.
Totally.
So sell it.
Totally.
They'll mow it, sell it.
It's actually saving money.
Yeah, right.
But again, you make different decisions because you just want to grow. You just want people to come. You're like, I don't care. And again, I'm not saying this is right. I'm just clarifying the position. But when you're early on, it's like, I don't really care if you're saved. I just want breathing bodies in the place. And again, I'm not making that advocating for it.
Yeah.
But I think there is a reality to, you just want people. You want experience. You want culture. You want life and kids. Bring your kids. Bring your dysfunction. Bring your crazy, because I just want people here.
Yeah.
But then when you get large or large enough, and again, maybe large enough is 100 for someone. Maybe it's 500. Maybe it's 1,000. Whatever it is, you start making decisions, and it comes from a book. And we were talking about it. But you want to maybe talk about this idea, and we can go back and forth a little bit.
I'll give a little backstory for some qualifications of what you're even intimating here. So. You're right. When we started, it was I opened the building, I turned on all the lights, and I set the thermostats. I did everything. I literally led worship for the first year, and then I raised up a singer to help me. My background's music.
Okay.
So I was very comfortable leading worship. My wife's a pianist, and so we've done worship together forever.
Yeah.
So I led worship, and I had this young lady who was singing with me. So I was the lead vocalist, and she'd sing back up. And then the fourth song, she would sing, and I'd take my guitar off and go stand on the front row, lift my hands and worship. Be like, man, wasn't the worship great today, everybody? Then I'd walk up on stage and be the pastor. And you're just looking for people to help you build something and grow and reach folks. And I remember my first youth pastor, my interview at the district recommended him. So I didn't have any time to interview this guy. This is terrible, but it was just true. And I remember talking to him. I was like, you're credentialed. You went to Bible college. It's like, do you like kids? Do you like students? And I literally was like, I think we had a 30-minute interview, and I said, look, dude, just don't break it. That's your job. And he looked at me, what? Tony Stefko. I'll never forget Tony. He's like, what? I said, just don't mess it up. Don't hurt me and don't hurt this church. Can you do that? And he was
your
great.
First hire?
Yeah. I paid him $50 a week. I had a worship guy. I gave him a gift card with gas money every week. We just had nothing. We had no way to hire anybody. Anyway, so, from those early days, we've grown every year, and we went from, 50 to 250 in a year, and then 345 or 360 or something like that. And then we went to 1,000, from 350 to 1,000 in 15 months. And it's from some of the resources that I've learned from you guys and from the Grow Network with kind of the real simple strategic structuring. Like I understand culture, I just didn't understand systems.
Sure.
Which honestly, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But like a lot of churches have great culture, their systems are terrible, or some churches have ridiculous systems, like they got everything fine-tuned, but it's just a drag to go there.
Yeah.
So you really have to marry the two together. And we obsess at our church about the culture of the church, how does it feel to be there, and then the systems that move people through it. So anyway, we've grown like consistently ever since. In 2018, we're named fastest growing church in America. And honestly, that did some things to me that I needed to be exposed. I don't even report our attendance. I don't know our attendance anymore, actually. I haven't since really COVID. I just quit asking. I told our team, I was like, I'm only responsible for whoever shows up.
Do they track it?
Yeah.
So you're just saying, for me, I don't care.
Personally, because when I was 30, I took over a church nobody wanted. And I remember going to meetings for ministers, and I had one guy tell me once, he's like, now where are you again? I said, I'm in Clarksville. I'm at this church that was there. And they're like, oh man, good luck up there. Better you than me. And guys would just kind of dismiss it in our denominational meetings and stuff. And they were being kind and, that kind of banter that we do. And then we broke 1,000, and then I got like accused of watering down the gospel and not being theologically conservative enough, so it was just crazy. But anyway, I took a church nobody wanted and was really hard and cost me everything, and took it for no money. And then it was a fast growing church in America. And then from there, you go from number one to down.
Yeah, right.
And the next year we were down, still in the top 100 or whatever. But I just remember going, this is awakening some unhealthy affirmation stuff in me. And that's not my goalpost. Like, it was never I didn't take it with that goalpost in mind. Like, attendance was a thing. I didn't care about that. And then all of a sudden it became a thing. So anyway, I had to make some shifts in my own heart. And as the organization has changed, and this will help set up kind of what we were going to talk about with this book I just finished, and it's just changed my life with how I think about the organization. The scariest thing ever happened to me, my pastor, a friend of ours, Pastor Chris Hodges, really got in my heart about my own personal self-care, like sabbatical rest.
Yeah.
And it was because, and this sets up what we're talking about, what you want to talk about. All of a sudden, we're this large church, multiple thousands, multiple venues. I mean, we're running like 10 services a weekend we had a location in Washington and Phoenix and Middle Tennessee, and then 3 locations in town. And I was I had to confess to my pastor, not an area of sin. I was like, I can't even remember what it was. Like, I had some temptation. It was kind of benign, things that we're normally tempted with. I was in my office, and I had this passing thought of some temptation. And then I went to this obsession to hide it. What would I do to cover it up? Like, if I did, I don't even remember what the thing was.
Sure,
let's just say it was, I don't know, stealing money or, kissing a woman, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever the thought I had was, which everybody has their temptations or whatever, and you got to take that thought captive, etc. I went into like this 30-minute plan to not only do the thing, but cover it up. And here's why. Because I wanted to protect the church. And I wanted to protect my family. It was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Honest to God, in ministry, like I have this, this is probably real personal here, and maybe people listening may judge me for this, but I'm like any other dude, I didn't grow up in church. I'm a man. I got, whatever issues of insecurity and temptation like anybody else. But in an effort to protect the church that I built, that God built, I went into this plot, this temptation to cover up this area of sin. It was something so stupid. I mean, I had this whole plan, and it was like the Lord snapped me out of it. And I called my pastor, and I was like, hey man, I don't know what to do with this, but I just had like this whole cover-up strategy plan.
For something I didn't do. Yeah.
For something I haven't even done yet. And I started I was really pouring it out to him. And he starts challenging me on areas of rest and accountability, and who has all my secrets, and who can I really confide in, and all that kind of stuff. But this desire to protect the church used to be, it's why I went there. To build this church, to lead this church, because I love the people that hadn't even come yet. And then it shifted to this protect it from falling apart again, or my reputation being sacrificed, or my family being hurt. And it was just really, it was a strange thing. But that's what organizations do. Yeah. That's what large organizations do. That's what companies do. That's what nations do.
Right.
So I've just come through this book. I highly recommend. It's from the 80s, or early 90s. It's a book called Barbarians to Bureaucrats. Yeah. And it's a study of the life cycles of organizations and of nations. It's not a faith-based book at all. Yeah. But we have books like McIntosh wrote a book on the life cycles of a church, and that phrase, what got you here, what bring you here. And like you guys at River Valley have done such a great job of reinventing yourself. I think about your dad. I think about like Pastor John Lindell. If you look at the evolution of those men as leaders, even in like what they wore. Their outfits, how they've just kind of stayed current, and they've trended, and they've allowed themselves to evolve and grow. But organizations have a tendency, like a lot of organizational books talk a lot about what the organization is like at the different stages of the life cycle. So if you look at like a bell curve of birth, life, death, right? A lot of teachings on this stuff will talk about what the organization was like at the various. Well, this book, Barbarians to Bureaucrats, talks about the leader, the CEO, the pastor, the president, the whoever's at the top of the company or the organization. And like when it's in the birth and like let's just do something stages, it's led by a prophet who sees nothing but has a vision for something and says like, hey, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move to Minnesota and I'm going to plant a church.
Right.
Like your dad has talked to me about the early days of that church and no one believed in him.
Yeah, you got nothing.
And nobody would help him. And it was like 10 years before, and he's still just dreaming and going, it's going to do something. Yeah. It's going to pop off. And a prophet sees what no one sees and says it, and nobody believes him, and he's like, man, I'll risk it all. Mm-hmm. And then it shifts as it begins to take shape. That leader has to shift to like a barbarian, where I'll chop down the trees, I'll take some ground, I'll sacrifice, whatever it takes to make something sustainable and livable. And then it goes to like this builder, explorer phase. So the left side of the bell curve, it's like birth to like adolescence to now we're going to start living and we're going to like enjoy the fat of our building and whatever. It goes to like a builder explorer. So that's where you guys are at. That's where we're at as a church. It's like, okay, we've survived. We're not scared about money anymore. We've got a good reputation. Let's expand. Let's add campuses. Let's grow our influence. Let's do a network. Let's like see what we can do. We're building, exploring. That was America after the Civil War. I mean, that was our country, man. We were just, and then after World War I and II, when every civilized country in the world was destroyed, America goes, we'll do all industry. We'll be the revolutionary builders of everything. Right. Builder, explore phase. That's kind of the 70% under the bell curve, over the top. It's the balloon of life. It's your 20s to late 60s, right? It's like, I'm building life, man. I'm buying a boat. I'm getting a lake house. I'm just building life. Yeah. Raising kids, sending them off to college. You're building, exploring. So what happens is that leader could be a different person, but their focus definitely shifts. Yeah. From prophet to barbarian to builder, explorer. Well, then what happens is as the bell curve naturally, and churches have a 40-year, historically, statistically, churches have a 40-year life cycle from birth to death or the beginning of decline. Sure. Those are daunting stats, but it's true. Like we have to be every 20 years reinventing, figuring out how to start a new bell curve, right? So as the organization begins to decline, and it could be a generation died off, the pastor moves on, the political party shifts, right? Like we're experiencing that in our country. Right. And the organization begins to decline, the leadership starts looking for a leader who can be the administrator. And that's a different skill set, but it's a different mindset. So they go, like if your dad left and the board was in charge of hiring a new pastor, and I'm sure your dad has a succession plan because he's a good leader and he's smart and he's thinking ahead. But let's just imagine for a second, your dad leaves suddenly or whatever, and it's left in the hand of the board. We
were having this conversation the other day. He goes, all right, if I die, this was last week. He goes, if I die...
There's a book, by the way. I'm sure somewhere, a notebook your dad has with a plan.
Yeah, but he was talking through all these different things about, his will and he has a nonprofit that he leads that he's like, all right, here's how I want you guys to know about the nonprofit. Right. Here's what the church would do. The board knows that this is the decision that needs to be made now. This is the one that could be made later. And at the end of it, we said... So the easiest solution is the longer you live, the better this is going to get. Right. So anyways, I just interrupt for it was last week.
Hey, I am curious, is my name in that book at all in the plan? There's just a thing.
Yeah, I think that he said that call Mike and he'll send some money. I think that's what it was. Yeah.
I'll come and be your consoler.
Yeah, perfect.
So typically what happens though, and by the way, it's a healthy thing to have a succession plan. Yeah. Even when you're in the building growing stage. Because you could get hit by a tree, you could die suddenly. I took vacation this summer, and I told my board if I get hit by a boat, or whatever the case, I took a cruise. So I said if a cruise boat hits me, here's who I recommend take my place. I told them that. I mean, I think it's always a good idea to have a backup plan, and part of that's our responsibility to grow and develop leaders. But anyway, typically in an organization, they don't have a plan, or that term is over, so we go elect a new person. So what happens is the organization goes, we need to find somebody who can manage all that the prophet, barbarian, builder built. So, the prophet has nothing. The barbarian's got like his wife and children doing everything.
And an axe.
Yeah, and the builder explorer's going, let's look at a pastor. We've got a team, we've got a staff, we've got interns now, we've got a healthy board, we've got good financial positions. Well, it didn't start that way. We were 52 people with no money and trying to sell off land to pay the pastor's salary. Yeah. Now all of a sudden we're giving away money. We've got stuff. Yeah. So the leadership would go, we need to find someone who can administrate this thing. Right. Who can handle that size budget, that size team. They're not looking for another prophet because the prophet's dead and is already built. They're not looking for another builder. And man, this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid a lot of organizations don't even realize they try to do that in an effort. Here's going back to what I was saying earlier about my temptation scare.
Right.
They do it in an effort to protect
right.
the organization instead of building the organization for the next generation.
Right, right.
Like in the church world, you go, we want somebody that can pastor all these people. Well, they're going to heaven. Like,
yeah.
That's a thing. Like, you need to pay attention to that. But you need a pastor who can reach people that haven't come yet.
Right.
And that still has a vision, a prophetic vision, a barbaric vision to reach the lost. But churches, statistically, after the founder, the builder, the legacy pastor, they go, we need somebody who can run a church this size.
Yeah. No, it's true. And the book would say that's a bureaucrat, right?
That's the administrator.
Okay,
so
the administrator's next, then
so
bureaucrat's
kind of
the bottom.
No, so the bell curve continues down to administrator, and then bureaucrat is the next type of leader, which if a visionary gets hired in that administrative role, it kills them.
Sure.
They're like, what do you mean I can't?
Yeah.
What do you mean I can't change the carpet?
Right.
And they're like, well, the last guy put the carpet in, and his mom was in the choir, and she did the banners on the wall, it's... So the administrator either loves it and is like, I'm going to do this till I die, or they leave because they're visionaries, right?
Yeah.
Well, then it shifts again as they're in decline and they're starting to feel the pressure of decline, like our money's down, we're not growing anymore, our people are leaving, or they're moving to the suburban church instead of the urban church that we used to be, like the big First Assembly, whatever. Then they bring in a bureaucratic leader who starts playing the politics.
Yeah.
And the bureaucratic leader is the one who says, man, I've earned my position here, I've paid my dues, and you start looking at the team as you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's the ultimate look of bureaucracy. And you position the organization as a tool of bureaucracy. So then you become the hosting organization, or you become known as the place who can do for others, but then ultimately it's to do back for you or for the leader. And then once that type of leader leaves, and as it's dying, it's led by aristocrats who they're just in it for themselves.
Yeah.
It's like my retirement gig. I'm going to do this till I die. And the prophet, barbarian, builder, administrator, they all built something that has a purse and a nest egg and an account that keeps me here. So what's interesting is both extremes, prophets and aristocrats, are commanders. They're like my way or the highway.
Sure.
In the middle, when it's all healthy, it's like collaborative leadership and organizations do work together. On the one side, I described this to you the other day. On the one side of the organizational chart, if it's like in building and growing stage, the leader says, I will sacrifice anything to build something great for others. On the other side of the org chart, on the bell curve, those type of leaders say, I'll sacrifice anyone to take care of myself.
Sure.
And to build my life.
Yeah, so it's almost like, you see personality traits and stuff, and there's the healthy version and the unhealthy version, right? It's almost like that same curve is the healthy versus the unhealthy.
Yep.
And what's interesting is, you mentioned that sometimes churches hire that person, but the other risk is that person becomes that person, right?
Absolutely.
And so that it's actually not just, no, you were a prophet, and then you were a barbarian, and you were a builder, and those things are absolutely true.
Yeah.
But over time, the more comfortable you get, the more money you get, the more accolades you get, the more comfort, all that stuff.
The bigger your church gets, the more you have to lose.
Right, exactly.
Go back to my story of I'm trying to cover up that sin because of all I have to lose.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Right.
And I had a shift in my mind in an effort to protect this thing I built.
Yeah.
That was my attitude.
Yeah. No, it's true. And
that's King David, right? He was a great kid when he was in a field killing bears and Goliath. But look at him with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Same dude shifted to his kingdom, and he had to be really broken.
Well, and look at even at the end of his life where, he's crying for Absalom, and his I don't know if it was who it was, I'm forgetting who it was, who came up to him and said, you got to stop crying for Absalom because he's against you. He's your enemy.
Yeah.
But you have men that are willing to fight for you. And I think that there's a lot of people that hold on to what was. Yeah. And it's like, you got people in your church right now that are here today.
Yeah.
And they're ready to reach their neighbor, and they're ready to do things if you lead them.
Right.
And again, this isn't to be critical to pastors or denominations or anything, but I do think it's to be aware for us that, I mean, honestly, we're having this conversation in River Valley. What's ironic about all of that is if you're watching a video right behind us, you see our theme for our year is take ground.
Let's
right.
go.
And so the barbarian, my dad's not lost that nature in him.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think what we've realized is it's very difficult. I mean, we have a little over 150 staff members on our team, and 100 interns, and all these people in different roles that are serving in the church. Deacons, I think over 250 or 300 deacons. So we have a lot of leaders.
So
in
you
our
guys
church.
go like Bible direction when it comes to deacons too, because they're servants and they're empowered to serve, which is brilliant. A lot of churches don't do that.
Yeah,
anymore.
so we have an elder board, we have a deacon board,
that's great.
And then we have staff and then interns. But for us, we're seeing that it's not, my dad has not lost the barbarian attitude.
That's great.
But the bigger that you get, the harder it is, because now you have people that are reputation protecting, right? I'll give an example, and I don't mean to pick on anyone from the team. I won't say who they are, but
I'll say it.
One of the Talking Church episodes I did with Dave Ramsey. And so I was cutting up some clips from the Dave Ramsey episode, and one of the thumbnails I made, Dave said this, but the thumbnail said I was a hell-raising, beer-drinking kid. And that was the thumbnail, because I was like, that's going to get clicks, right? And then he's going to share his testimony.
Yeah.
And I got a message and from a couple people, and they're like, hey, I don't know if that's the best thumbnail that we should use, but I got like 10,000 views on that clip. And I'm like, that's that barbarian attitude. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm right, they're wrong.
I'm going to chop the force down, man.
Yeah, but it's like,
I'm going to get splinters, I'm going to bleed.
Maybe we shouldn't do that to protect the image. And again, I'm not saying one is right or wrong. Sometimes you need to protect the image. If you're too barbarian with too much to lose, you're not a builder per se. But if you go if you go too far down that road, and again, we're at General Council, if you hear some cymbals crashing or whatever. But
I think it's prayer time.
Yeah. At your church, maybe not my church. But can you talk about that a little bit, where you see that people are trying to balance that? Yeah,
well, let me just say this. Administrators, aristocrats, and bureaucrats hate barbarians. They hate them. Now think about it. Like when River Valley wasn't the first church in Minneapolis, in Apple Valley, LifePoint wasn't the first church in Clarksville.
Totally.
And as we're taking ground, and as we're doing stuff, and we're doing stuff nobody else is doing, and we're not trying, like, that. Here's the thing, we're not against any church ever.
No.
You guys have the River Valley Network. We coach and give money to a ton of churches. We want every church to thrive. But we're doing it in ways that maybe they're not doing it, right? Like adding campuses, service times. We're jeans and smoke, instead of choir robes and hymnals.
Right.
But organizations that are led by aristocrats and bureaucrats, they judge and I'll never forget, I got an email from a pastor in town. He was so mad. I don't think I'm like super creative or provocative typically,
right.
But I do like to try. So like one year we did for Easter, I was preaching through the book of John. I'm an expository verse by verse preacher. And I was preaching through the book of John, and I happened to land on Easter Sunday, John 4, when the paralytic, Jesus says, do you want to get up? Get on up.
Right.
So I titled the sermon, Get On Up, and I had James Brown as the graphic for Easter Sunday. So it's like Easter at LifePoint is Get On Up. And the theme song when you walk out to preach was like, get up, get on up. That might, do you know
I've
James
heard that
Brown?
song,
Okay.
yeah. I know James Brown.
Logan Paul listens to him. Anyway, that's a full circle joke right there. Anyway, so got heat from how sacrilegious to put James Brown. Do you know his testimony and the way he lived his life? I was like, no, I didn't. They hate barbarians, like doing something different. I'm going to cut down these trees to build a building, right? One year we did a Facebook-themed Easter Sunday, social media, like a series, and it was called Deny Your Selfie. This is back when Facebook was still hot and before Instagram and Twitter was really not really that big of a deal yet. So the graphic was the Facebook banner, the blue, it used to just be a blue bar across the top and the Facebook font, and then you'd have your profile picture. Well, the profile picture was Jesus, a cartoon of Jesus in sunglasses holding up an iPhone, taking a picture of himself doing this. So we had this on a banner, and the sermon series was Deny Your Selfie. Deny yourself and follow Jesus. It's like the command of God, the number one command, like leave that life and follow me. So the sermon was all about that, and it was calling people to repentance. And so we had this banner out in front of the church, with all of our Easter service times, and inviting people to come to church. And I got an email from this church just past us, and it was how offended the pastor was, and how dare I, and how sacrilegious I was, and how dare you defame the gospel of our Lord Jesus with Facebook and social media. So I responded with, in kind. And I said, hey, man, thank you for your email. Thanks for talking to me directly. And, on Easter, we see a ton of guests, and we want to reach lost people, and Facebook is very current.
Totally.
And he's like, I understand missions. Take the stupid sign down. I read the tone into that. Yeah. But my point is, bureaucrats hate barbarians.
Right.
And people who lead organizations in that season of the organization or with that mindset, man, they come. It's just hard to be prophetic. Think about the prophets get boiled in oil all the time. It's just hard to have that kind of edge as a leader. But I'll tell you who loves those kind of leaders: lost people, the folks that haven't had your product yet. If you're building a business and you go, I'm going to create, you ever heard of crumble cookie?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, it's not hard to make cookies. Recipes are on bags of chocolate chips.
Right.
But they just decided to do it a different way and make them massive and expensive and niche and just cool. And they're just disrupting the dessert world with $5 cookies.
Yeah.
They just go, hey, we see a place that nobody's doing something, and we're going to do whatever we can to make that awesome.
Right.
We're going to put pink F-150s on the road and brand ourselves. And they're disrupting the whole market and industry by just taking ground. But they're growing to the point where they're starting to enjoy the fat of the land. And it's very easy to switch to administration role, but you got to stay barbaric. You got to stay prophetic.
I think that churches probably over time struggle more with the right side of the curve, with the administrative, the bureaucracy, especially
statistically the second and third leader is when the organization shifts to that side.
Right. And it's probably similar in business too.
Correct.
You look at that though, and I mean, denominations probably struggle with that as well. And again, we're here at General Council with the Assemblies of God, but I think that sometimes I see a struggle in myself, and I maybe will be hesitant. I feel like I'm more of a barbarian just because I've observed my dad in it, and I'm second generation. But again, I'm holding back at times. But I think it's because you can push it too far, right?
Sure.
You talked about Facebook example and the James Brown, but there are other examples that are detrimental to the gospel, and I think that maybe is
we're more calculated with that now.
Yeah.
I was 3 years in with the
discerning
Facebook.
that, right? To where and again, this is not a podcast to call out other people. That's not my intention. I don't like doing it. But I've seen churches that do stuff that are using profanity and using things that I'm like, I mean, I get your perspective, but I really feel like it's missing some of the gospel in the, you're throwing out some other things to include those things. Or well, I'm not one of those people. Or I use profanity because that's just the people that I'm trying to reach. Or I don't care about what I dress and wear and cleavage in this because that you're not my people. And I'm like, yeah, but the Bible also does talk about that. How have you? I mean, you know the Bible.
Yeah, Jesus never became a prostitute.
Right.
To reach prostitutes.
Yeah.
He never became a Pharisee to reach Pharisees. He never. I always think that's such a silly. Reason to compromise just holiness. I'm kind of old school in this regard. I got saved when I was 17. Prior to that, I grew up in a family with just a lot of freedom, no real boundaries. The boundaries were don't get caught.
Right.
From my mom, she would say, "Hey, you just don't drive drunk."
Sure. Yeah.
15, 16 years old. So no boundaries, right? The idea of trying to hide all the and just trying to be relevant to culture. I never remember as a kid going, "I wish a pastor would come drink a beer with me." I just never remember ever needing that.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's a little silly. And people say, well, Jesus hung with sinners, but he always changed them, or he drank wine. And okay, if Jesus is your model, he also walked on the water and died for the sins of the world. So go do that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe that's a little snappy, but
no, I don't think it's snappy.
I do think that we never want to give up influence.
Right.
So you can't be barbaric at the cost of the thing. So a barbarian, he's going to cut down a forest, not the building he's building. Right? Or he may take some wounds. The barbarian may take a loss. I may not take a raise for 5 years or take a job with no money because it costs me. But I'm not going to do anything to cost them.
Right.
And very often, if we're not careful, and sometimes we do it in a way to reinvent the organization, we go, let's just be trendy or cutting or whatever. But then you end up costing the very people. I think I heard a pastor say recently, you don't get the privilege to ruin someone else's church that they've been in for 25 years because you're the new guy and you got a new idea and you want to be trendy.
Right.
So, okay, this is the other person in an organization. So if you go back to the graphic of the org chart, the left side is the starter, builder, grower guy, leaders, person, female, whatever. And then once it hits the other side of the bell curve, like statistically in the church world, I'll just say this in the church world because that's what we're talking church here.
Yeah.
Statistically, once a church gets on the right side of that bell curve and kind of halfway down, it never comes back.
Sure.
Never. That's why church revitalization is so hard. Church planting organizations say it's easier to start something from scratch than to raise something from the dead.
Yeah.
But what the author, I think it's Larry Miller's his name, he presents this additional leader. So if you look at, if this is my bell curve, this is my whiteboard right here. Okay. So prophet, barbarian, builder, top of the curve. If you're going to have a new bell curve, you need the type of leader required is called a synergist. This is why fathers handing the churches to their sons works. Because a synergist leader has prophetic and barbaric tendencies like their predecessor, like their founder who they know and love and respect or have followed, or they know that type of leader and have that in them, but they respect and they understand the history, values, and the culture of the thing they're trying to lead, and they can speak into the hearts of the barbarians or the aristocrats in the organization and lead and love them with barbaric prophetic edge. So, for example, you know, your church is 28 years old.
Yeah.
Well, there's some folks that have been there since before you were born.
Yeah.
And they can, let's say you became the pastor at 35 or whatever, and they'll go, son, I was here before you were ever here. I changed your diaper. Okay, those are barbarians and aristocrats trying to lead the leader, right? And they're just leveraging the fact that they've been in the organization. By the way, people throughout the organization shift in their mindset too.
Right.
It's the pastor who's taken a traditional church with Sunday school members, and the pastor's going, I just want to go to small groups. I want to kill Sunday school and go to small groups. Yeah, that's barbarian for the sake of just destruction.
Right.
You can't kill the people. You gotta care for the people. So the synergist goes, okay, how do I love and lead with vision and value what they've built and have known, but also take new ground. Yeah. And also cut some new forests down and do something. And that's the synergist leader. And the book gives a whole chapter on what that leader looks like and why it's such a rare leadership type. Yeah. It's so rare to be able to lead prophetically, barbarically, while loving grandmas and grandpas. That's why a lot of young pastors who take classic churches, they either get suffocated and they just acquiesce.
They're
and
there for 2 years and they're gone,
or they lose vision.
Yeah,
that's true. They'll say things like this, and I've heard it. It's just different here.
I've heard that so many times,
It won't work here.
Yeah, until another pastor comes in and is seeing big growth, and then it's like, well, they're watering down the gospel or they're doing this.
Totally.
And again, I'm such a fan of the church that I never like to be like, I hate if anyone would think that I'm critical. Like I've been in the church my entire life. My job is to serve other churches. Like that's literally what I do. But I think if we can't acknowledge the truth about, this is not just church, this is culture. So it's not even a pointing a finger at the church. It's just a reality. So thanks for pointing this out. And even this book, again, 80s, 90s, Barbarians and Bureaucrats. I love that we talked about
super
this.
Good.
But you've
I feel like an evangelist for this book.
No, but I heard it the other day too, and you've lived it. And I just think that going back to the barbarian and this synergistic person, what jumped into my mind when you said that was, how do I know if I'm being too provocative, or how do I know if I'm being too far? What jumped into my mind was, can I bring the people, and you kind of alluded to this, but can I bring the people that I'm leading with me? Yeah. Can the explanation sitting down, like for example, and I'll just use this, if you change your stance on marriage, or if you change your stance on abortion, or a hot topic today, the people that are a part of your church, you can't convince them to come with you. I'm sure some would be like, well, pastor knows best. But the people who you've been teaching for the last 20 years, they're going, you've taught me the counterpoint to this. Yeah. I can't come with you. But if it's a culture, like, hey, we're going to do some fog because it allows the lights to be seen, and kind of is a cool artistic way to just approach worship, and we're going to get rid of the robes, and we're actually going to change the pews for the seats, and you can bring people along with you because you're not changing your theology, you're changing your style. Yeah. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and he said the attractional church is not the end goal. Like we shouldn't be attractional, we should be missional, we should be sending. But an attractional church is better than a dead church. Yeah. And so I think can we combine these things of the attractional, missional, synergistic, barbaric, to say, God, what are you calling me to do so that I can minister to my community? Again, what works in Clarksville might not work in Minneapolis, it might not work in Columbus, it might not work in Singapore or in Japan, but the gospel does, and we can contextualize. So I love all of what we're talking about. I'm sure people are racking their brains saying, is my church a barbarian, or is it led by a barbarian? Am I a barbarian? Am I a bureaucrat? And I think it's a good gauge to kind of look at yourself, say, where are we in that cycle?
Every chapter of that book asks the question, am I a barbarian? Am I a prophet? Am I this leader? Or it'll say, do you work for this type of leader?
Sure.
And how to react to them. I would say, like, I never get into style fights. I don't care what kind of music you have. I don't care how long your services are. If you like to preach for an hour and a half, I don't really care about style. But that's really what a lot of fights and accusations are.
Right.
They're the blue jeans church. What's funny, you brought up like the smoke and the lights. Like, historically, the church for centuries had smoke and lights and colors and glass and stained glass. And we're kind of reverting in the contemporary world, like to have churches that look like that actually looks like the medieval church.
Totally, yeah.
In a lot of respects, is to be able to see the light cast through glass. The smoke. Yeah. So anyway, it's just funny the stuff we pick on.
Yeah.
But what you cannot do is try to be provocative and barbaric with our core, like you alluded to, this doctrines and truth and what we're trying to do, our mission. So we believe the Bible is true. We believe Jesus is Lord. The only way to heaven is to be saved and born again, and you can live a spirit-led life. And we believe the Bible's true, which then like attacks a whole bunch of like doctrinal things like marriage and sex and sexuality and all that kind of stuff. So in an effort to grow the organization, you can't change your core. Right. It's like Chick-fil-A selling burgers to get more people in the door.
Yeah.
I'm sure if anybody could master how to make a burger awesome and give you the best drive-through experience in the world, it's Chick-fil-A. The problem is they don't sell beef.
Yeah.
So as the church, we cannot get away from our core. Like, to use Get On Up as an invitation card. That's what it was. It was on the invite cards.
Yeah.
And James Brown's picture pointing at, that's just style. That's just a provocative style thing. But dude, it was like the most Bible-centered. And the message on that Easter was, you're all actually dead and paralyzed in your sin.
Right.
And the only way to find hope is to get up from your sin, to get up and give your life. Dude, we had like hundreds of people saved that Easter. I'll never forget it. We were meeting in a middle school at the time, rebuilding our building. And we had this one couple, they sat in the front. They were wearing like house pants. And I think one lady had on like a shower cap. They just rolled out of bed saying, we thought this was a James Brown tribute concert. I said, on a Sunday morning? They go, we didn't know. We thought it was an odd time too. Yeah. So they came for a James Brown tribute event and gave their lives to Jesus.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't in an effort to be barbaric. Like, at the end of the day, if a barbarian's chopping down wood, it's still with a vision of saying, I'm going to go build something in its place.
Yeah, and you don't.
So you can't destroy the ground.
Right. And your intention was not to trick people into thinking it was a James Brown concert. No. But I do think that there's a difference, right, between all of what you're saying. I love that distinction, is you can't let the core principles of who you are, and that's where the things that bother me, and again,
that's where Target screwed up this year.
Yeah,
they lost
we're in Minneapolis.
Yeah, so that's why I brought it up. I wanted to talk to you about this. That's honestly the heat that Target's getting, is because they lost their audience.
Yeah,
they lost sight, and I can't imagine the political pressure they're under anyway to do whatever they did, but they lost sight of their core. Like, dude, look, just sell some cool T-shirts,
right?
And highly priced groceries.
But can I tell you this?
But they lost sight of that.
Here's what's crazy. I talked to someone from Target. We have a ton of people at our church that work at Target. And they said, you know what's interesting? Our northern and blue state stores did not see any hit. And our red state stores were down in the red like 20, 30 percentage points, right?
Yeah,
which again, it's not a political statement, but it's interesting to see that there are certain things that people tie their value to. Whereas I would say where we're at, a lot of people are like, I don't know, I've known that they're like that forever.
Sure.
But it goes back to the church. The thing that frustrates me about knowing when our being provocative goes too far is it almost feels like you're apologizing or you're knocking on Jesus, or like, like we're not one of those type of churches. We're not one. When you're like, I think that's what Jesus was. Like, again, holiness. And again, somebody's a God, I get it. I have friends that totally disagree with me on a lot of things. But I'm like, I just don't want to, and when I was talking to Pastor Chris on the podcast a while back, he was talking about this too with reconciliation. He's like, I don't want to answer to God and say, you were too harsh with not loving your brother, right? But it's kind of the same thing with holiness. I don't want God to be like, yeah, God, like I know I cheapen the holiness, but you get it, right? Like, I fear God so much
right.
that I just can't. Again, James Brown, Facebook, I feel like if Jesus was here, I'd be like, dude, that's funny, whatever. But there are certain things where I'm like, I don't want to cheapen your holiness. I don't want to cheapen your sacrifice. I don't want to cheapen your atonement. I don't want to cheapen what you've done for me.
And the call of God to follow him at all costs, to deny yourself and follow Jesus.
Totally.
I don't want to cheapen that.
So I think for all those listening, and we could talk about this forever, but don't have time, but I think for those listening, it's a reminder for us to not, if we're in the bureaucratic stage, what do we got to do to find that synergy again? Or maybe we need to hand this over to somebody else who's ready to take it. Maybe we need to get on our knees and pray for somebody new. Maybe the person's already in the church. Or maybe you're the problem and the pastor's been saying, I'm trying to get you to do it. But asking yourself, where am I on this journey? And God, what should I be doing? Where should I be at? And be sensitive, not provocative, but also not bureaucratic, to say, God, what are you asking me to do? You're asking me to build your church. And how can I be at the top of that point to be a builder?
Well, and the statement you just said, to build your church. That will keep you in the paint. That'll keep you really like in the middle on the provocative style stuff. If you keep it at, God, this is your church. Does this honor you? And if what you're trying to do is something to get people in your crowd versus people to deny themselves and follow Jesus. You know what I'm saying? It makes that whole debate on what's provocative or not a little simpler. I'm with you. Like I have a real fear of God. I want to stand before God one day and hear, well done. And I think when you mentioned Pastor Chris earlier, one of the statements he said, I think is just so brilliant, simple. That's what I love about him. He says the stuff to you, I could have thought of that. But he said it first. But anyway, he says the lie of the devil has always been to make God less and man higher. And anything that we're doing, and I think this is where the church world, if I can just speak broadly about even mainline denominations, where they've lost, and the truth is, every church, every denomination that's gone kind of what we would consider maybe left theologically or center and away from deny yourself, be transformed by the renewing of your mind and surrender your body to the lordship of Christ, like your whole self. Any church that has shifted that way, they're all in decline and dying.
It's true.
And now they're being led by bureaucrats and aristocrats who are trying to preserve and punish anyone that calls that out. Like I think of a denomination that, they've just gone through a major split. 6,000 churches have left their denomination in the last 2 years. And the denomination's response is not repentance and asking questions and humble. They're charging them and suing them to leave. Because we got to protect the brand. We got to keep the coffers full.
No, it's true.
Anyway, I do challenge, and I'm writing a leadership talk about this too. I think it's important to identify, this could be in your family. Like if all you do is just, this is what we did because we grew up this way, by God, we're from Mississippi, is how he's always been. You're a bureaucratic grandpa. It could be your family, it could be your church, could be your company. I think it's important to evaluate the am I and do I work for and are we questions. Is this the kind of organization? And ask the question, like, where are we in the bell curve? Are we still taking ground and doing something for somebody? I don't know about you, but I can't imagine not innovating for the sake of making a difference. But so many in the church world, we're talking church here, so many churches have just lost that edge and said, this is just what we've always done. Anytime I'm coaching a church and they want to grow and they want to whatever, and they say, well, we've just never done that. I don't. That doesn't even compute with me. To me, that's like, oh, new ground. That's exciting. Let's go try something new. So I think it's important on the tail end of this. Just evaluate where your organization is. Evaluate your type of leadership, and maybe you're a barbarian in a bureaucratic role, and you can't figure out why they're always against me. Well, you're in a bad spot because they don't want a barbarian. They want a bureaucrat. Or maybe you're a bureaucrat, and you're killing the place faster. And it would be good for you to humble yourself. Like do some statistic reports. You're the numbers guy at your church. Didn't you tell me that? Don't you do a lot of the numbers stuff? Yeah, it's like a health screening. Look, I got my blood drawn and did some numbers, and they said some things about me that have required that I make some changes in my life. Including how I eat and how I physically exercise and sleep and water intake. So I can be a bureaucrat about that and go, I'm not changing. It's the way I've always been. Or I can be barbaric about it and go, if I want to have a longer, healthier life, I can make the changes. So you got to evaluate yourself in the organization. I did have one more thing to talk about. Is this about timed out? I think you're. I think we're doing a 2-hour marathon here.
We're about at the end. But
I just want to know, like, where did you get these I've seen skinny pants. I've seen skinny shirts. I don't know where to get skinny chairs, but I am sweating. This chair is so snug. I don't feel like I can move. Where do Minneapolis people use skinny chairs?
Man, I'm not even going to respond to that because
let me just tell you
this chair feels great for me.
I'm a full-size man.
It feels great for me.
And this is a tough chair.
Well, I apologize about the chair, but I'm grateful for the conversation. It's been
very focused.
It's been a great time talking, and you're a gift to the church, you're a gift to us. Thanks for sitting down with us talking church today.
Your friend.
And I'll see you soon. Thanks for Barbarians, Bureaucrats. It was great.
Peace out, everybody.